evening, everyone. Welcome to the STM Catholic Faculty Series, Life as a Scholar and a Believer, featuring Dr. Maureen Long. My name is Damon McGraw. I am an assistant chaplain here at St. Thomas More. The Catholic Faculty Series is an opportunity to have an informal conversation with a Catholic faculty member of the Yale faculty about their spiritual journey of faith and how that journey is related to their professional life as a scholar and a professor. Tonight, we are honored to have as our guest Dr. Maureen Long. She is the Bruce D. Alexander, 65, professor and chair of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Yale. Maureen is an observational seismologist with a PhD in geophysics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She has been at Yale since 2009 and teaches both undergraduate and graduate courses on seismology, natural disasters, and forensic geosciences. While currently chair of the EPS department, she previously served as director of graduate studies and chair of the departmental DEI committee. She's particularly interested in cultivating diversity and inclusion within the EPS department and the field of earth science. She's a productive scholar who is also committed to public education and outreach. She ran the Field Experiences for Science Teachers program at Yale, which provided 1-week field experiences for Connecticut-based high school science teachers. She also serves as a board member here at STM. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing about Maureen's spiritual journey, in particular, how her Catholic faith informs her work as a scientist, a teacher, and leader. So let's begin by thanking Maureen for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you today.
So perhaps we could begin just by hearing a little bit about your story, about the origins, the growth of your faith, the context which shaped it, and kind of its ongoing development.
Yeah, absolutely. So where to start? Gosh, I am originally from Massachusetts, so I'm a native New Englander. I grew up in the kind of outer suburbs of Boston. I grew up in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, graduated from Chelmsford High School. Yeah, I mean, in terms of faith, I grew up cradle Catholic, grew up in a very much sort of practicing Catholic family, weekly mass going, very, sort of big extended Irish Catholic family, and in a very kind of Catholic milieu as well. Just, again, Boston is a pretty heavily Irish, Italian Catholic sort of place. And so it was very much, a big part of my faith was a big part of my life, a big part of my family's life growing up, and just sort of also, just kind of in the background ether. An interesting maybe postscript or coda to that is that actually these days, not many of my immediate family are still practicing Catholics, which is sort of, it's been very interesting and kind of cool to see everyone in my family sort of take different journeys on their faith. But yeah, grew up in Massachusetts, went off to college, did my undergrad work at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York, and then grad school at MIT. So I except for 2 years when I was in first and second grade, when I went to Catholic elementary school, did none of my schooling at Catholic schools, never taken a theology class, never taken a philosophy class. So definitely kind of went for the STEM education path. But it's served me well, I guess.
Clearly. So thank you. So I'm curious, when you were in high school and then emerging into college, what were the things that kind of drew you towards this path of the sciences, and was there any connection that you can see between the way in which you were attracted to that and your faith tradition or your upbringing in faith?
Yeah, great question. So my origin story as a geophysicist is this, and I always tell this story. So I was lucky enough that I had a class in earth science in 8th grade. So, my public middle school in Massachusetts, everybody took, earth science in 8th grade. I did not have a super inspiring teacher. I thought a lot of it was a little boring. I was not super into like rocks and minerals. I am now, but at the time I wasn't. But we did the unit on plate tectonics. You know, we had to make a map where all the earthquake locations were and all the volcanoes were, and like, you know, it kind of outlined all the boundaries of the tectonic plates. And I just thought, this is the coolest thing I have ever heard of. I must do this. And so at the age of, you know, 13 or however old you are in 8th grade, I said, I want to be a geophysicist. I think I only half kind of knew what it meant. But it ended up being really what I was interested in. You know, went through all my science classes in high school, did not care for biology at all, loved physics, so, and ended up going into geophysics. So it's a really interesting question about whether was that sort of like vocational choice influenced by my faith at all. I mean, I think the honest answer is no. I didn't choose my field based explicitly on anything to have to do with my faith. But I will say that I have felt, and I feel, you know, very obviously grateful and blessed to have my faith in my life and to have this STM community in my life. And I've always felt like having just a firm grounding of what you think is important in life and how you want to live your life, both in your professional life and your personal life as well, really does help to guide you on the path that you want to choose. So I guess I would say it was certainly indirect, but yeah, you know, I've wanted to be a scientist since I was 13 years old. Being a scientist is, I think, the coolest thing you can possibly be. So, and I you know, this is going to sound cheesy, but I wake up every day psyched that I get paid to do science for a living. It's pretty cool.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, for many people, there is in our culture and society a sense that moving into the profession of science is challenging to faith, especially in terms of perhaps the process of faith formation as a young person, and then the encounter with the scientific profession in high school and college, that can be something that creates a sense of tension or a sense even of conflict between those two areas of life. And there's, of course, a long history of that being a flashpoint, both in American society as well as, you know, broader globally, culturally. And I wonder, was that an experience that you had as you transitioned into your adult life, specifically in your academic and professional contexts in high school and college and later? And I wonder, you know, how did you kind of come to reconcile or relate those two aspects that were key in kind of creating and forming your identity?
Yeah, the kind of the famous or infamous like science and faith dichotomy that everyone sort of not everyone, that people sort of talk about, and that I will admit I have not really spent a lot of time ever fretting about this or feeling like it's a problem for me. You know, I think certainly for me at least, science and faith do two very different things. I think I'm a scientist because I have a drive to want to know about the world and to ask questions, in my case, about how the earth works, that, you know, questions that nobody knows the answer to. And then you get to like dream up an experiment or a model or something and find the answer to a question that no one knows the answer to, which is, you know, that fulfills a very deep need in me, I think. You know, just the drive to know and to want to understand the world. And faith fulfills a completely different need, which is, you know, I mean, in my case, I mean, there's a lot of things that faith does for us, right? Like, you know, how do you live your life? How do you live your life in a meaningful way? Why are we here? You know, in my case, I have always felt a very, very strong need to believe that there is a light that shines in the darkness. Like that is something that just calls me very profoundly. And that's, you know, there may be some people that get that from science, but for me, that's not something that I get from my science. So, you know, to me, I view faith and science as, you know, two different ways of seeing the world and two different ways of understanding the world. for me, they've never felt much in conflict, honestly. But that's, I know that not everybody looks at it that way. And you do, I get it, of course, when people sort of say, well, look, you're a scientist. This is what you do for a living. You are looking for a rationalist, rationalist set of explanations for how the world works. And, I have always, had the view that, if you're looking for proof about God in science, you aren't going to find it. That's not that's not something that science can do for us. So I guess I do understand that people kind of look at that and say, well, gosh, isn't there a tension there? I will say that I have not often come across. I have very, very rarely come across any kind of like hostility in science to certainly people knowing that I'm a person of faith. It's not something, I don't, go around wearing a t-shirt announcing it, but, I think people
we gotta get you one.
Actually, I don't know, I take that back. I actually have an enormous collection of STM t-shirts in my drawer. But, people know that my friends and acquaintances and, know that I'm religious, and I really have, almost never gotten any flack for it. It's interesting. Another neat thing about what I do. So I'm an earth scientist. My specialty is seismology, as Damon said. So I study earthquakes, and in particular, my research is I study the structure of the deep earth using earthquake waves. And if you get me started, we will talk about that for the next 45 minutes. So, but actually, my subfield of seismology actually has a very rich history of contributions from folks who are religious, and actually, in particular, folks who are Catholic, and actually, in particular, Jesuits. So the Society of Jesus actually members of the Society of Jesus did a lot of early work in seismology. I've seen it referred to as the Jesuit science, actually. Part of that goes to, back in the, late 1800s when seismometers, seismographs were being developed as, so this is technology to measure ground motion from earthquake waves. This network of Jesuit missionaries, many of whom were scientists by training, went out and actually established a lot of the early seismic observatories. And actually, in fact, in my field, so the American Geophysical Union is the big, for me, that's kind of my big professional association. And they're one of their most prestigious awards. It's actually an early career award for early career scientists. It's known as the McIlwain Medal, and it's named after James McIlwain, who was a Jesuit priest. He was a seismologist. He was a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and he was the president of AGU for a couple of years. And so the major award, and one of the major awards in my field, is named after a Jesuit priest. So, it certainly helps me in thinking about faith and science and whether there's a dichotomy there, knowing that in my subfield there's actually been very profound scientific contributions coming from Catholics and in particular from Jesuits, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So it sounds like, in a way, that one of the indirect ways that your faith informs is it gives you a sense of the integrity of this intellectual quest for understanding and knowledge, as well as the integrity of creation and its capacity to be known, and that you do stand in a kind of lineage of that is Catholic and Jesuit informed.
Absolutely, and I mean that was a really eloquent way of putting it, so thanks for coming up with the words I was struggling to find. But yeah, no, I mean I think that nothing about my faith informs the way I do science. I mean, the scientific method is the scientific method, and I will say that's not, and how I do my science is not informed by my faith. Mm-hmm. How I relate to my science and how I sort of appreciate it, and the sense of wonder that I feel about, again, learning something new, discovering something that nobody knew before, that is absolutely informed by my faith. And it's, I feel, again, very lucky and blessed to have that perspective.
Thank you. So you said something that I want to pick up on, and that's you talked about the way that the life of faith kind of provides a sense of light, a light in the darkness. And of course, you're more than a scholar, you're more than a professor, and part of this Catholic Faculty series is about getting to know you, getting to know our Catholic faculty as whole persons.
Yes.
And so I wonder, as we've sort of cast some light on your profession and your scholarly work, I wonder, so what are the aspects maybe in the other dimensions of who you are as a person that that faith has shaped or informed how you live with this sense of light in the darkness, as you put it?
Yeah. So let me tell you, I guess, a bit just about kind of like my family, and sort of, I talked a little bit about my villain origin story there. I'm not a villain. That was a joke. You can laugh at it. But yeah, so in my family now. So I guess to continue the autobiography a bit. Went to grad school, finished my PhD, moved down to Washington, D.C. So I lived in D.C. for a couple of years when I was doing my postdoc. There I was very lucky to meet my now husband. So I met, again, Tony's his name. We got married a couple months before we moved to Yale. So we got married, then he's a photographer, which means he's very portable. And so he was like, we can move wherever you want. Those who are, academic careers know that it's not always so easy to figure out where you're gonna move. So he, very graciously followed me up here. He had been working for Catholic University of America. He was the staff photographer at CUA. So he very graciously left his job to follow me up to Connecticut. But yeah, so we got married, and then very shortly thereafter, I started my job here at Yale, which of course is, faculty jobs, especially at a place like Yale, are kind of not for the faint of heart. Academic science is not, it's a wonderful job, and I wouldn't trade it, but it's not an easy gig, right? So we definitely were, I feel like that whole time of our lives together, and my life for sure, is like, kind of establishing ourselves as this new family and in a new place, and me with my new job, and working very, very hard all the time to kind of prove myself, and not feeling honestly always terribly confident about my scientific abilities, but trying to just fake it till you make it, which is, I'll give that tip, like it works. And then my kids, so I have two children. My kids are Patrick and Caroline. You may see them around at STM. So Patrick is now, Patrick is 14, and he's a freshman in high school. And Caroline is 11, and she's a sixth grader. So they were born, kind of in my first few years on the tenure track here. And so I was definitely juggling, this newish, very high pressure job, and having, a newborn, and then 3 years later having another newborn. And so, yeah, definitely this kind of a little bit of a crucible, I guess, of sort of when you're kind of learning to adult. I guess I was an adult before that, but I felt for me that was like, you get that permanent job, you get married, you start a family. It was sort of learning to do adulting, and in kind of a high pressure situation. And so, but yeah, so Tony and I have been coming to STM since shortly after we moved to New Haven. Patrick was not baptized. Patrick was baptized at St. Bridget in Cheshire, but Caroline was baptized here, and so we've been, embedded in the community here for a long time. And I don't know. Yeah, I think it's difficult for me to overstate how important my faith, but also in particular this community has been. So thank you all, has been for just kind of like, helping. Keeping me sane and keeping me grounded and helping to keep me keep in sight of what's important, what's truly important, which is, at the end of the day, it's not the number of papers on your CV or, how many pages your CV is. That's not, sure, science is important. What I do is very important. I take my professional life very seriously, but at the end of the day, that's not the most important thing. And I feel like having my faith, but in particular, my faith grounded in this community, really was like very important for me at a very pivotal time in my life, making that transition to, I guess, where I am now, which is what, mid-career, middle-aged soccer mom, you know.
That's fantastic. And so it's clear that you're extremely accomplished, that you've reached, as you said, a kind of, I would say, mid-career or prime of career, really. And you've...
oh, I like that. We'll go with that.
And I, you know, it's, when I was reading what you did, I cut out some of the technical language because, frankly, I didn't know if I'd pronounce it correctly or, you know, it was, and so
watch out, get me started.
Exactly, and so, but it's clear that you're passionate about it, and it's something that you've come to have a deep belief in its value, its significance, and I think it's rare that, you know, that all of us as persons outside of the field have an opportunity to have an informal conversation with someone in your position, and I wonder, if, you know, when speaking to lay audiences, right, non-scientific audiences, you know, how do you feel like you could help us understand, you know, what it is that you're kind of doing in your field and why it excites you so much, and perhaps what we might be able to learn from it through you? Absolutely. Okay,
no. First of all, I love talking to non-scientific audiences. I do quite a bit of it. Anytime somebody invites me to give a talk to a non-scientific audience, I always say yes. It's one of my favorite things. So basically, I'm going to try to give you the 3-minute version. So I'm interested in what happens in the interior of our planet to produce all of the things that we sort of see geologically at the surface. So I think about things like natural disasters, which is earthquakes, volcanoes. I think about plate tectonic natural disasters. My own research, who's taken natural disasters? My class, I see at least one. Yeah, all right. So when I teach natural disasters, we talk about a whole spectrum. My own research is focused on things like earthquakes and volcanoes, but I'm interested in what happens deep in the earth to cause plate tectonics, to cause the plates to move, to cause hazards like earthquakes and volcanoes, to cause mountain building, and it's important. I mean, it's awesome, so it's fun to study, but it's important for a bunch of reasons. So believe it or not, and now you are gonna get me going. Plate tectonics actually, over the Earth's timescale, plays a key role in actually regulating Earth's climate. It regulates the amount of CO2 that we have. I can see you guys nodding, Natty D, veterans there. It controls like where our mineral deposits are. You know, we think now these days about how are we going to find enough like lithium for our batteries? Like that's an Earth science question. That's a plate tectonic question. So I'm interested in what happens deep in the Earth's interior. Now, we can't go down there. The deepest we've ever drilled is, you know, maybe 8 miles beneath the surface. The radius of the Earth is over 6,000 kilometers, so we really can only scratch the surface. So if you want to understand what's down there, you know, who's heard that the Earth has a crust, a mantle, and a core before? Everybody heard that? Yep. How do we know that? You can't go down there, right? How do we know that? There's a few answers, but my answer is we know that from seismology. We know that from seismic waves. So my research is focused on when there's an earthquake, seismic waves go down into the Earth, they pass through the deep parts of the Earth. We can record, you know, the wiggles that tell us about the ground motion from those seismic waves. And my job is to turn those wiggles on a seismogram into insight about how the Earth, or the Earth's interior works. And I'm going to leave it there, or else we'll be here until 10 p.m. But find me afterwards if you want to talk more about technical details.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And as you were explaining that, it brought up something else for me that I think is a kind of contemporary, and that's that part of your vocation is clearly to articulate the value and significance of science and the integrity of the scientific method and the way we can have confidence in these results. And I feel like it's pretty clear that in the current environment, there's a lot of questioning of that. Scientists are sometimes painted as people who are pursuing their own agendas for various purposes, and there's a lot of voices that want to essentially question the integrity of the scientific enterprise, or that things that they claim to know or demonstrate are not reliable. And I wonder, what has your personal experience with that been, and how do you handle that? How do you respond to that? And would you mind solving that problem for us?
Yeah, that's true. Here we go. wish I could. Yeah, gosh, no solutions other than to say, like, it is, of course, something that I think about a lot these days. I think most scientists do. There has been, of course, a sort of collapse in trust in the scientific enterprise in not everywhere, but certainly in some corners of the world and some corners of our country. It feels kind of puzzling to me, kind of like how we got to this point in terms of public trust in science. It's frustrating to me that some of that undermining of public trust in science sometimes comes from people of faith who do view faith and science in conflict, which again is not something that I have ever felt myself. Gosh, I don't know. I think all we can do is keep doing what we're doing. We meaning scientists, and we meaning those of us in higher education and students, and keep doing what we're doing with integrity, as you said. And I do certainly hope that it does make a difference that scientists are willing to stand up and articulate not only to sort of stand up for science and the integrity of science, but also to talk about themselves as whole people. And in my case, as a person of faith, and that scientists are not I don't know, like the cartoon evil mad scientist with an agenda. I don't even know what agenda I would have if I was an evil mad scientist. But no, we're people who have a very strong desire to understand the world, and for almost all the scientists I know have a desire to use that science for good and to do good in the world. So. Yeah, I sadly have not solved that dilemma, but it's definitely something I think about, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. I think that just simply doing your work with integrity, being a public figure that speaks and lets people get a sense of who you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it, perhaps is one of the best ways that you can address that. So thank you for that. And so to kind of pivot then to something else that's sort of within that field of contemporary interest. That you highlight on your resume as something you're involved in. You talk about your interest in the promotion of diversity and inclusion within the field of earth science. And so I wonder if you could share a little bit, perhaps a story of how that emerged as a priority for you. Does it have a either explicit or implicit relationship to your faith perspective, or sort of how did that happen, and why did you continue to be passionate about that?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm so glad you asked that question, because it is something that I do feel very strongly. And I know like at this moment, I know DEI is like this super loaded term. And again, I don't understand how we quite got there. When I read sort of contemporary news accounts or about DEI being controversial, I never recognize the description of kind of like what DEI is being made out to be. So just I'll state my own kind of thought about it is just we have a responsibility in science and other corners of academia, and everywhere in life, just to make sure that people get treated fairly and that people have an equal opportunity to succeed. And that has not historically been the case in science, in my subfield, in academia. I think it's I think and hope it's pretty obvious to everyone that has not always been the case. Now, so much progress has been made, and that's great. I think my own kind of interest and passion for this, I think, probably came out of being a woman in science. And so, I'm whatever you say, prime of career, I'm mid-career, right? It's prime of my career. Yeah. So I'm certainly older than the students in the room, right? So I graduated from high school in 1996. I was born in the late 70s, graduated from high school in 1996, finished my undergrad in 2000 and was going to grad school in the early 2000s. So, I'm certainly well past the generation of women scientists who were kind of like truly the pioneers and the only ones, and but I went to RPI, as I mentioned, which is a science and engineering school. I did my whole education at science and engineering schools. It was fun to come to Yale, and we have humanities here, which is great. So my class at RPI, I think, was 18% women. So it was like still pretty, and I mean, I definitely, I was a geology major, but a physics minor, so I took a bunch of physics classes and was very used to being, one of a very small handful of students in the room in some of my advanced physics classes. This is a fun statistic. I never once in my entire schooling, I never once had a woman professor for a science or engineering class, or science or math class. I didn't take an engineering, but science or math class. And like I'm 46, so I'm old, but I'm not like that old, right? Not to kind of oversell it, but I think, and I won't speak for others, but I think many women in science, do feel like they've faced barriers. They've, the other day I actually got a letter addressed to me, sort of in my capacity as chair, that said, "Dear Sirs." And I mean, okay, that's like super minor, but I'm just saying that didn't happen last. I'm not letting it get to me, but obviously, I will say I feel like I've faced way more adversity in science because I'm a woman than because I'm a person of faith, like that, So, and again, I don't want to oversell it. I have, for the most part, full stop, had wonderful teachers and mentors and advisors who believed in me and gave me great, great support, and the vast majority of them were men. But yeah, sure. I think that was certainly the thing that gave me an in into thinking about DEI work, and just, what can we do to make sure science and our academic spaces and all of the spaces that we move in, what can we do to make sure that they are welcoming to everybody, and that everyone feels included, and that everyone can bring their full self, and not feel like any dimension of their identity, whether it's their race or their gender or their religious identity or and anything, never feel like that's a barrier to succeeding. And again, we've made so much progress in science and in higher education and in society, but we aren't there yet. And so, a lot of the stuff, the DEI kind of stuff on my CV, a lot of it is a lot of it's related to women in science. A lot of it is I actually do a lot of advocacy around mental health in academia. That's an issue that I've worked a lot on. That's absolutely a DEI issue. And so, but it just, it's work that is very meaningful to me. It gives me a lot of fulfillment. I feel very strongly about it. So I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick follow-up, is there anything you've seen that perhaps is kind of programmatically or in terms of practices, optimal ways that you've seen to enhance that, to make those barriers perhaps more minimal, or to create fairer opportunities or greater spaces of welcome?
Yeah, I haven't cracked the code on this one necessarily either.
The thing I think is, I often hear, people they love the idea of that, but then they're uncertain about how to do it of that, and the specifics of it. And so I just wonder if there's anything that you've seen that, in terms of when you were on that committee or and doing that as chair, that you've seen here's a practice or here's a policy that doesn't fit the stereotype that sometimes we see in the media, and that has been successful and been useful, and is something that maybe could be more widely emulated.
Oh, interesting. I'll give one concrete example, and I'm going to come back to mental health advocacy, which is, again, this is an issue that I feel passionately about. You know, we've actually, and this is something we've done in my department, we've had actually several kind of like mental health awareness sort of events where we've had like the embedded clinicians from the graduate school come and talk to our whole department and talk about resources and just, you know, sort of statistics about mental health challenges in academia. And those events have been really well attended. We had one actually during the pandemic, it was on Zoom, and I mean, like 85% of my department came to it, which was great. I think awareness is always, you know, I think, and this is something I think important for us as people of faith as well. People's stories are important, right? Like people's experiences are important. Listening to people and hearing what they have to say and really engaging with it is important. And I think this is less of a programmatic thing and a little maybe more of a personal thing, but I think in the DEI space, it's so important to listen. Put down, you know, and this is for me as much as anybody, put down your preconceived notions. Don't dig in right away on your kind of preconceived, you know, political position or whatever. Listen to people's experiences, because there's a lot of wisdom in people's lived experiences, and there's a lot of wisdom often in people who maybe disagree with you on programmatically what is the best way to achieve our shared goals around DEI. So I have really benefited from, you know, just trying to listen to people's experiences and listen to what people say they need. So that's, yeah, to me, that's very powerful.
Thank you. And I'm reminded that even though you say that, you know, it's sort of something that's not directly informed by faith, that's what you just described is exactly what in the Ignatian tradition is called sacred listening.
Yes.
And so
yes.
It's very much a spiritual practice. And you mentioned the Jesuits earlier, so I think that's
an
interesting connection.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about the many students here and graduate students and early career academics here who are trying to find ways to integrate their faith with their academic life and also to live at the same. So that's kind of one area of endeavor. And a second is they're also trying to, as you seem to have done fairly well, balance their family life, their personal life, their life as a whole person with their academic and professional goals and meeting them at a level of high achievement. That is something that is characteristic of Yale. And I wonder what kind of advice you might have for those undergrads, grads, and early stage academics who look to you and see someone who seems to have done that pretty well. It's
all a facade. No.
But, yeah.
Like I said, fake it till you make it.
Yeah. And so I guess they might want to know, how did you fake it so well?
What are my secrets? Okay, gosh, let's see. A few things I'll say, and I mean, maybe especially to the students in the room, and you know, really enjoy and cherish your time in the STM community. And I mean, one of the great blessings of my life, I think, has been that I've been so fortunate to be Catholic in a university setting. As someone, you know, I mean, I went straight to college from high school and straight to grad school, and then, you know, okay, a couple years at the Carnegie Institution, which is not a university, but then came here. And so I've been super fortunate to be embedded in the faith communities, and in my case, the Catholic faith communities at RPI and at MIT, and now here. And all of those places have great, you know, great Catholic communities. Nothing is like STM anywhere, but RPI and MIT were both great. And I was very fortunate, I think, to do, you know, a lot of the growing up that we all do at that age, in a milieu where, yeah, you know, I was at MIT, at this you know, super intense, very science-oriented place, and also, you know, going to church and going to talks and going to lectures and learning about my faith as I was also kind of doing my work and my science. And so, you know, we're all really fortunate to have that sort of, a faith community that's also an intellectual community is really great. So like, take advantage of that, because for me that was really important in, I think, my maturation and sort of coming to like mature adulthood certainly as a believer, but as in my professional life as well. Gosh, balance. Yeah, I feel like I do not usually, maybe we all feel this way, but like you're trying to keep, a million balls in the air at all times and you're just dropping them left and right. And it's at a certain point, it's like, what can you do? I think having perspective on your professional life and your academic life and your professional achievements, I think having a little perspective is good, right? As I said before, I'm enormously proud of the work that I do as a professor here, as a scientist, as a researcher, as a teacher in the classroom. I'm proud of the challenging work that I'm now doing as a department chair, which is not for the faint of heart. Again, I'm proud of all that, and I'm proud that I can bring again my whole self to that work. But it's also it isn't everything. Certainly I got a very good perspective on this when I became a parent, right? You have, for me, I had my kids, Tony and I had our kids, and at that, then like life-work balance, it isn't theoretical when you have a newborn at home, right? And so like, not everyone is a parent, and this isn't how it goes for everyone, but for me, that is one thing that forced me to just kind of have a little perspective. Like there is more to life, right? Than again, like the next paper on your CV or the next grant or whatever it is. And I do think, knowing who you are at your core and knowing what your values are and what you stand for. And of course, for those of us, many of us here, of course, are Christians and Catholic Christians, and using that to help you discern. Discern there's another Jesuit word to discern, what is important? What are the things that you value? What are, when you come to the end of your life, as we all will someday, like what are the things that you're gonna feel like, yeah, I am proud of how I lived my life. And for me, like, yes, of course, I am gonna feel proud of my my research accomplishments and my science accomplishments, and certainly the work that I do as a teacher, but I'm gonna feel prouder of the fact that I, was a wife and mother and friend and daughter and somebody who, I hope, God willing, right, like does good in the world, and so can I tell you the secret to getting to that, that sense of balance? I can't, and God knows I am not great at doing it all the time, but I think just, develop that sense for yourself of like what's really important and what are your values, and you'll do great. So get lots of sleep. Get the 8 hours of sleep. I hate it when my students come in and are like, oh yeah, I slept 2 hours last night, and I'm like, oh no, that's not it. Take care of yourself. Get sleep.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a good moment perhaps to transition into some questions from the audience. You might see that we have some microphones here, and so I would invite you, those of you who have questions, to take a moment and come up to the microphone and introduce yourself, and then we'll take questions.
Well, thank you very much, Maureen. It was the great awe and wonder that you created, and it was the discernment of all of us to be here. So I am so grateful for your presence and grateful to STM. My name is Shadab Kanwal, and I just recently came to the New Haven area, so thank you very much for welcoming me here. I'm with the School of Medicine, Biomedical Informatics and Data Science. And coming from California and being a seismologist, and being a close and keen observer of the Richter scale.
Yes.
Was there any time in your life when you felt that the scale is tipping the faith conditions for you, or how are you able to balance the foundational faith that you have with science?
Okay, a bunch of big questions. I thought you were going to ask me about like when was the time that you felt an earthquake, because I was gearing up to tell that story, because for a very long time, I did not feel an earthquake for a very long time. I've lived on the East Coast my whole life, and there were several that people had felt that I either slept through or or was walking outside, and so you don't feel it. And I was starting to get a big complex about being a seismologist who'd never felt an earthquake. I actually felt my first one, so I'm answering a question other than the one you asked, but I'll get to it, I promise. The first one I felt was actually in LA. I was visiting LA for work and felt a magnitude 3.3. And then I actually was in Japan once and felt one. And then about a year and a half ago, who felt the New Jersey earthquake here? Yeah, big day for me. So anyway, that's what I thought. That's what I thought you were going to ask. Okay, but yeah, I guess the bigger kind of we're back to the sort of faith and science sort of question, right? And I think there are definitely moments where my scientific work does intersect with my faith. I mean, one common one, honestly, is when I hear on the news that there has been an earthquake, so I get texts, right? So I get a text. Yeah, I really do. I get texts on my phone. Actually, sometimes I do. In the last few years, I've started doing media, more and more media requests, and so sometimes I learn there's been an earthquake because CNN calls me and is like, "Can you be on TV in 20 minutes?" But it is. I always look at where it is and what the depth is and what the magnitude is, and sometimes I immediately am like, okay, this is not going to be an earthquake that causes any damage. But sometimes, I will. When I got the notification on my phone about the earthquake in Turkey, when was that? A couple of years ago, and just a pit in my stomach, because I knew right away that it was I forget the magnitude now, but very large magnitude, shallow strike slip earthquake, and you just in a place that has a lot of seismicity, and also some challenges with infrastructure, and I always say a prayer when I see it. Again, sometimes I can tell right away it's not going to be a problem, but I always say a prayer, and it's devastating, of course, when this event that for me, for the research I do, earthquakes are kind of it's literally the source of the energy that we use to image the Earth's interior. It's an important part of my work. So you kind of, you get a little excited, but also it is. I do think a lot about the human toll, and I always say a prayer when I get a notification of an earthquake in a place where where it's kind of obvious that there's going to be a lot of damage. So there's a small example.
We always say that when it goes beyond 5.5, the call to God become higher.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go.
So thanks so much, Maureen.
Thanks, Liz.
I'm sitting with you saying that you did not have a woman professor.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, within our Catholic faith tradition, are there Catholic women, alive, deceased, saints, ancestors, anyone who's been a model or an inspiration for you?
Yes, what a great question, Liz. Thank you for asking it. Liz and I and Dennis, who's over there, we're in a small church community group that started during the pandemic 5 years ago, and we're still going semi-strong on Tuesday nights on Zoom. Yeah, so I'll qualify it. Not that I never once had a woman professor ever, but I never once had a woman professor in any of my science and math classes. So not in any classes in my field. The department that I did my undergrad in had no women professors. It was a small department, and then when I was at MIT, I think there were 40 professors in the department, and I think there were 3 women at the time. It's much better now. But yeah, I'm glad you asked, because the answer is yes. I'm very into some of the the women kind of doctors of the church, and I am not not a historian and not super knowledgeable, but I love reading. I read Thérèse of Lisieux's autobiography recently, which I really enjoyed. Some of those women were like amazing. So Hildegard of Bingen, who was like, one of the first people to sort of do not quite science, call it science would be a little bit of an anachronism, but sort of like natural history. And she was also a composer, and she's writing these medieval manuscripts, and and St. Catherine of Siena just coming in and being like, yo, this is how it's going to be. You guys are all like screwing this up, and like, hello. So I love the just many examples of just fantastic, like, kick-ass Catholic women who have definitely been like very inspirational. And again, a lot of them are intellectuals and leaders, and often in times and places that didn't really want to hear it on either the leadership front for women or the intellectual contributions front. And so the answer is yes. Models for all of us, men and women. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we have time for a couple more questions if anyone is interested.
I'm Michelle.
I was gonna say I'm Michelle.
Sorry.
That's okay. So as somebody who studies the early church, I keep thinking about sort of historical responses to earthquakes, and I'm curious if you come across any of that, where you see even the archaeology that happens around earthquake remains. Like, how do you tell an earthquake has happened in the 4th century, 6th century?
What a great question.
Yeah, so I'm curious how that interacts, because I study a lot of the, in my world, a lot of it is the ritual response to earthquakes, or sort of the social responses to earthquakes.
We should chat sometime.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So there is there's a whole field of, it's called paleoseismology, which is it's not my own area of expertise, but it is literally sort of like digging trenches in the dirt and looking for evidence of earthquake offsets in the what a geologist would call the very recent past. So, but sometimes stretching back, hundreds, thousands of years. Geologists think of in billions of years. So, recent, I know it's all relative. So there is this whole field, and there's been a lot of work done. In particular in the Holy Land. So there are lots of of course, references to earthquakes in the Bible. I have the fun little parlor game of like, whenever there's a reference to earthquakes in the Bible in the readings, I'm always like, earthquakes. And of course, the Holy Land is a region of the earth that is earthquake prone. It's kind of on a plate boundary, lots of seismicity, and so there actually is a little bit of a subfield of kind of like biblical archaeology that does think about earthquakes and the history of earthquakes. There was a geophysics professor at Stanford, Amos Nur, who he actually did a little like documentary about this at some point. I feel like I have it on DVD in my office somewhere. Not my own area of expertise, but that is definitely a thing. That's sort of like that corner of like biblical archaeology. But yeah, we should chat sometime. Sorry, you're gonna get me started. There's actually several kind of examples of like earthquakes and religious history interacting or intersecting. The Lisbon earthquake in, I think it was 1755, which happened it was on a holy day. I might have been on All Saints Day. I don't remember which one. I know this because it's a seismology nerd thing, but anyway, that was, it was a lot of the whole, city. It was this huge, very destructive earthquake. There was a tsunami in Lisbon Harbor. If you've ever been to Lisbon, which is a gorgeous place, you can actually go, and there is a ruined church that was destroyed in the earthquake that has been sort of preserved. The ruins have been preserved, and you can go and visit it. And it was actually like kind of a big turning point for a lot of people's faith, because everyone is in church. There's catastrophic earthquake happens. A lot of people are killed, like literally by like the church falling down on them. And it apparently like occasioned a lot of kind of like thinking about, how do we react when a tragedy happens, and and of course at a time when the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution is sort of happening, and we're coming up with naturalistic, explanations for physical phenomena, and so lots of fun examples, I guess, of earthquakes intersecting with history.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your talk. My name is Kelby. I'm chemical and environmental engineering PhD, and not having any women professors, I was wondering why you decided to become a professor and why you're not in industry and how you discerned.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for that question. Yeah. Good question. I definitely did not come in to undergrad or grad school thinking necessarily that I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a scientist. That was all I knew. And I certainly when I was sort of starting college, I knew I was super into geophysics and this is what I wanted to study, but I had only a very vague notion of what being a scientist actually kind of meant. And even, coming into grad school, I think I wasn't thinking anything other career-wise other than just like, hey, I want to be a scientist because that's super cool. And I actually, for a little while in grad school, I think this is probably pretty common when you kind of are like in the middle of your PhD and you're a little bit like, yeah, I do not want to be a professor. Like, I think a lot of people go through that. But no, am I the only one? PhD students? No. Okay. But yeah, no, by the end of grad school, I was, I think just more open to, I think I saw being an academic scientist as being the best opportunity to really do your own intellectual work, right? And be able to ask the questions you wanted to ask and to really be in charge of the science that you were doing. And I thought that was kind of the best opportunity to do that. And I think that's right. And then I was, just extraordinarily fortunate that when I was, I did a postdoc after grad school, which in my field is kind of the standard path. I got it. Thank you. And then was, just extraordinarily fortunate that I actually was asked to apply for the job here. There's no way I would have thought that I was Yale material, honestly. So I was very fortunate that folks in my now department asked me to apply, and I landed the job here. I will say that I did not. I'm glad that I'm here at Yale and in academia for a million reasons, but I did not discover that I really have what I feel is a vocation for teaching until I started doing it. So it's not like I grew up wanting to be a teacher or really saw myself in that role. It just, kind of comes with the gig if you're going to be an academic scientist. And I love teaching. I think vocation is the right word. I really do feel like a vocation to classroom teaching. I love it. A lot of my teaching, actually right now, I only teach half-time because I'm department chair, but right now all of my teaching is undergrad classes, mostly that are actually aimed at non-majors. So I really love teaching, again, I love teaching and talking to folks who are not necessarily scientists. So I feel like I stumbled a bit into that part because, again, I didn't set out to be a teacher or a professor, but I'm so glad that I found, this combination of research and teaching that I have in my job here, because I truly love it, and it really does feel like a vocation for me. So, yeah, there are lots of options. There's a huge number of ways to make an amazing career and life in science or whatever field you're in. And so I would never tell anyone that it has to be academia or it has to be industry, but for me, it's been a really great path. It really is a good gig. It's a privilege. Again, waking up and knowing that I get paid to be a scientist and to teach people about stuff that I love. It really is. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I believe that's going to be a good place to leave it. You're welcome to stay after and chat. We do ask that you, in a moment, scan the QR code on your table and offer your feedback. But before you do,
It's like teaching evaluations.
absolutely. And before you do, however, let's be sure to thank Maureen for her time.
Well, thank you all for coming. And thank you, Damon. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.